Okay, we are live. This is fun. So just in case folks are wondering, this is my first Facebook Live, my first time going through Zoom, and my first time having my friend and colleague Eva with me. So I'm really glad you're all here, and I want to give you an idea of what this is about. So normally when you see me on Facebook, a lot of you do not know what I do professionally. So I'm going to give you a quick statement. My business is Inspired Choice, and I work with stressed women executives and their employees and help them to achieve career joy and well-being during uncertain times. And so I'm really excited to bring a topic that I know is relevant to all my Facebook friends and family. And I have with me Eva, and so I want to introduce you to Eva. Eva Medilek is a certified high performance coach and a relationship success coach. She's coached both men and women in the areas of personal development, leadership, and mastering habits for success. She specializes in helping driven, all of our high achievers have happier, healthier, more intimate connections in their relationships and business without giving up their power. And as I know you're fond of often saying, Eva, also without sacrifice. I could use a little of that. So welcome, Eva. I'm so glad you're here.
Thanks, Gail. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to a juicy conversation.
Yeah.
And our topic, one that I find is so current, so timely, is about how to bridge the divide through conversation with people we really care about, where we have maybe some polarization, maybe topics that we cannot address, whether it's at home or at work. And I don't know about you, Eva, and I'd love to hear. For me, when it comes down to almost all my coaching, I'd say 80% of it is, well, how do I go ask for that? How do I go have that conversation? And it's usually about those uncomfortable conversations that people need help. Mm-hmm. So tell me about your experience with the people that you work with and what's going on for you in your life.
Well, we have to look at what we fear, first of all, when we're having an uncomfortable conversation. And most of the time we just fear looking bad, or people won't like us, or they'll hurt our feelings, or maybe we'll hurt somebody else's feelings. And so that's why I always start every challenging, difficult conversation with acknowledgement and appreciation. You want to prepare the soil before you plant that seed of difficult conversation. And so the first way to do that is to create safety, create connection, show acknowledgement and appreciation for the person that you're about to have the conversation with. I have on my website a downloadable guide for having effective conversation and connections in your relationship, and it's called 6 Powerful Ways of Being. And one of the things that I tell people is, number one, you want to make sure it's a good time to have that conversation. You do not want to have a difficult conversation with a hangry person. Make sure they're well fed, they're well hydrated, they're not stressed by other things in the day. A lot of times we are so inwardly focused, and if something's pressing on our mind, we think automatically that the other person will have time to receive it.
Yeah, that they're ready.
And it really is setting the stage to have a conversation where both parties feel seen, heard, and respected. And so it starts by, number one, asking, is this a good time to have, I need to talk to you about something. Is now a good time, or is there another time that's better? If they're clearly stressed, make an appointment. When are you available to have a conversation with me? If you see people are just kind of, we're both wives, and we know good times to approach our spouses about something. Yeah. And when is not a good time.
Not a good, yep.
To ask,
I think I find it can help to really acknowledge the other person and say, this I really need you to listen to me, and I appreciate your courage and being with me in this conversation, and maybe set some guidelines. Usually, maybe always, the most important thing to us as human beings is to be safe and to be loved. And so
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
people are going on and on, even about the events in Washington, D.C. this week, someone says something, they're coming from a place of, this is how I feel safe. So it's so important. And I think you're right about the timing. And then I think sort of setting up, so how we're going to talk about it. Like I love a conversation triangle, sort of, this is where we are, this is where we want to get, and how will we get there? And I want to either regain some peace with you, or I feel like there's a subject we can't talk about, or whatever the outcome is.
It depends on, number one, whether it's a family member or a coworker or a colleague that you need to have the conversation with. But I always start with, you don't want to start with, I need to talk to you about something and something went wrong and we need to fix it. Really start with appreciating something about, start with what went right. So whatever that is, if it's a work situation, if there's something your employee or your colleague or your coworker did well, this is what worked and this is great. And I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for how you showed up and how you did that. If it's a family member, depending upon what that is, I can think of instances with my husband where I could, appreciate just what he does for me on a regular basis, what he does for our family on a regular basis before getting into the ask or the conversation or something that can potentially trigger him. And so just really start by, look, this is going well, this is going great. And really start out with that, because it really, you can even see people's energy change and tense up if you just go in with what's wrong. This didn't work, this didn't happen, we need to talk about this, and this is what I need you to do, and this is how it needs to
Another
go.
thing, that finger comes out.
Yeah, really don't go in with that, and just say, what, you're really good at, listening. And one of the other things is really don't be distracted. Ask for each other's full attention, be fully present. And, one of the common mistakes I see with us as humans is when we feel the need to defend our position, it takes us out of the conversation of listening, and we're already formulating our defense, our answers, our response, our reaction in the conversation without being fully present. If somebody's inviting you to a conversation, to just listen, but really be present and listening, and not listening with the mindset of defending yourself, but listening with the intent to really hear the person's heart and intention in those conversations. And you're right, with the climate that we're living in today, everybody wants to defend their position and why they're right and why their guy is right and why this is right and why you're wrong and this is how you need to see it. But most of the conflict in our relationships and in our conversations really occurs when we don't feel seen, we don't feel heard, we don't feel respected in a conversation. Regardless of the outcome that we're trying to achieve, you've got to win the process and the feelings.
Yeah, I love that.
So once you win the process, and once people feel, we may agree to disagree, but we can both leave the conversation feeling heard, that they really heard my perspective, my point of view. And I took the time to hear them, to hear their hearts. I always say we got to hear each other's hearts.
Yeah, you might not agree in the end. And I love what you said. I think, I may not get the quote exactly right, but Stephen Covey talks about listening to understand, not to reply. And so many times we think I have to make them see it my way. They have to come around to my way of thinking. And that if there's anything, I think in the last year especially, I notice more extreme digging in and opposition, even on what should we have for dinner. I mean, the trying to make everybody agree and get them over to your side. So that listening, not like, oh, wow. So while you're talking, I'm thinking, oh, how can I have a good comeback for that? No, I just want to hear what, like, I describe it as compassionate curiosity, just totally curious. I may know going in, and you could be my boss, or we could be peers, or it could be about politics. I know going in, I have a pretty good idea of your position. And I might say, oh, it's opposite mine or different than mine. But I wonder why she believes that, or what is it about her life or her experiences or her perspective? She's got a different perspective. I just want to know what makes you tick. And what
Get curious before getting furious, right?
I like that. Let me put that on the wall.
Yeah. And really, I always have, I changed my office a little bit, so all my little sticky notes are moved, but I always, it's something I always say with my clients, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. Yeah. And it's an invitation to share and not defend. Because when you go after, well, why do you feel that way? The energy changes and you got to defend your position. But if you come at a place of curiosity, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. And it invites a discussion. It invites more of a sharing energy than a defending energy. And I think that's really important now with the vast divide this country has experienced over a myriad of things that have come up for this country, for this world's reset button, so to speak, and a reboot, is to just be curious why you feel that way and be interested, be curious. Instead of just like, well, why do you feel like that? You see how the energy changes? Yeah. That's interesting. Tell me a little more about that.
Yeah, you even leaned in. Yes.
And you lean in. Yeah. Yes.
And maybe at the end, you simply know why they feel that way. And you may not have come any closer on the topic or how to proceed, but you both feel the other person cares and listens. Like you said, you feel heard.
And you have a greater understanding of why people feel that way. I mean, I'll share a quick story with you. In my personal life, there was a time in my marriage, not that very long ago, maybe now 3-4 years ago, where I discovered infidelity in my marriage. And two major things happened. I was able to look at how I was showing up in that relationship, that shared responsibility for that behavior. And I say share responsibility. So we each took 100% responsibility out of that. The second thing that happened was I saw an opportunity for a breakthrough for us to have an even closer relationship out of that mobilizing event in our relationship. And part of the work that we did to not only begin the healing process and take full responsibility, but to build a new relationship in our marriage was to learn about our earlier life experiences, our past, our childhoods, and how, what I call with my clients, I have them take relationship personality style assessment. And it really is learning where your habits, patterns, beliefs, and behaviors come from in your relationships. Why do we respond the way we do? Why do we have these triggers, these feelings, and into how we relate? And it's the foundation of all of my coaching. And it was something my husband and I did together through some counseling as well. And so I got to learn a lot more about his childhood than I thought I knew in the past, because we got really deeply curious about some relationship dynamics. And once I got a better understanding of his childhood situation, which I thought was all perfect from the way he described it. And my family was probably more the hot mess. It turned out that, you know, everybody has something that creates whether they hold back, what their fears are, how they react and respond. And sometimes that shows up as self-sabotaging behavior, and it damages our relationships. So once we got more curious about each other's early life experience, what I noticed in me was more compassion. Like I understood why some of my actions created a response or reaction in him that was damaging to our relationship.
Wow.
And so that understanding gave me greater compassion for the thought process and the behavior. And
wow.
and yeah, and you know, and it just allowed me to see the humanity and come from a less judging place, because I understood, you know, that makes sense why you would feel like you would need to do this to soothe the pain, to soothe an ache, and it maybe wasn't through me. So it was really, you know, not to make it all complicated and deep, I'm not a psychologist by any stretch of the imagination, but it's just how we can learn more about each other and be more curious so that maybe we understand better why you believe one thing and I believe another. And it kind of makes sense and I get it. And then we can be less judgmental and more forgiving and then help each other to see things from a different perspective.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. That's a very touching story and a very personal one. And I appreciate you sharing that. I think that sometimes we can have the same values and disagree. We can think, well, we grew up so similarly, like in a family. It might be about control. It might be about, it's about what makes us safe, back to the safety.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and the need to be right. Sometimes it's almost more about, like you said a lot earlier, the need to be right in how I look. I got to have all my facts together. There's some people that I won't talk about politics with at all because I don't have all my facts, and they will nail me over the head with their hammer of facts. And I'm like, all right, I'm not even going to try. We'll just avoid that subject.
Or it's an opportunity to hear their facts. And then like, you know what, I'm
Yeah.
gonna research that further and get back to you on that. That's all I have to say.
That's a good
Thank you for
point.
sharing those facts. Those are really helpful in helping me form my own opinion and perspective on it. You know, there's so many ways, you know, we avoid things because it's uncomfortable. And so, yeah, maybe getting hit over the head with facts is uncomfortable for you because you have the need to have your ducks line up in a row first. But what if you were just able to relax into it? It's like, wow, interesting perspective. Tell me more about that. And that's it. That's part of your fact-finding mission.
I like that.
Got something to digest here. Let me think about that.
That's useful for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's funny how even in that situation, and I'm thinking of where I'm picturing it can feel like not a competition, maybe a little bit of a battle or a one-upmanship, because that's what this other person needs to do. But I can just sit and say, yeah, so tell me more. And I love that. And by the way, if anyone is in Facebook with us live, please go ahead and comment, or if you've got a question, feel free. I'm curious, like in the workplace, what are the kinds of challenging conversations that you find with your clients that they're having?
My clients' challenging conversations are with themselves.
Well done. Well,
now here's the thing. We are often disappointed because of our expectations. And sometimes that disappointment shows up as anger and frustration, impatience, you name it. And so that can be in anywhere of like, listen, how you do one thing is how you do everything. With you're one way at work, you're that way at home. And
Yeah.
maybe even worse at home, because those people love you and are more forgiving than the people who don't have to go home with you. But my point in sharing that is, when we have expectations of what things should and shouldn't be, and how things shouldn't look like, and what people should and shouldn't say, and those expectations are not met, regardless if it's at home, at work, or in your communities, what comes up in us can be anger. It can be frustration. It can be stress. It can be impatience. When it really is, we're just disappointed that it didn't turn out the way we thought it would. And once you can recognize that, then you can, invite further discussion. Like say, and you can be honest. Look, I have a certain expectation about this, and that's not really what happened. So, can we talk about it? Because, one of the things that I find with my clients in all of their relationships, whether it's their close familiar relationships, their personal relationships, is that we often don't get clarity on if somebody heard exactly what we said.
Yeah. Reflecting back.
Yeah, we don't, and I'm probably the biggest person guilty of that, because I feel in my heart I'm being so clear on what I mean that automatically you should get it or you're an idiot. And I'm just saying that in jest. Yes. But it's always good to have a check-in every few seconds and say, so what did you hear me say? And if somebody's talking to you, this is what I heard you say. I just want to be clear. This is what you expect from me. These are your expectations. Be clear about what your expectations are, so that you don't leave the other person guessing of what they want. And so a lot of it is taking responsibility for how you communicate. And if somebody doesn't share back with you what you meant or what your expectations are, take ownership on saying, okay, let me try that again. Perhaps I wasn't clear the first time. And don't, say it the same way or louder. That doesn't make it. Let me try to,
let me
redo, do over. Let me try that again in a way that might be more clear than it was the first time. So take responsibility for how you communicate.
Yeah, I think you just touched on something I actually remember when I learned it, about taking responsibility for my actions, for what I say. And it was in my 20s, and I don't think it was a concept that we get taught directly, especially when it comes to communicating. And I grew up around a lot of, well, that's not what I meant to say. What I meant to say was, but we do have our reactions, and even being responsible for our reactions. Like, oh, that's a sensitive topic for me. I'm sometimes easily triggered by that. Instead of blaming, there's so much blaming. If we just turn on the news or look in social media, there's a lot of blaming. And instead, here's what I know about me, here's my reaction, here's how I see it, and then the other person's taking responsibility. It cleans things up. It's just so much cleaner, and you know where you stand. This is so, it's simple. It may not be easy, but I love a lot of what we're talking about.
Well, because our ego's in the way most of the time. That's the only way that makes it hard. I find perfectionists are the toughest ones to just be okay with getting it wrong and making mistakes, and owning up to, like, my bad, I didn't explain that clearly. I'll take responsibility for not being clear enough so that you knew what I expected, and that's why this project didn't turn out, or this task didn't happen the way I thought. Like, okay, yeah. I own that, and I should have checked in. I mean, that's happened to me in my relationships too, where there's one cute story I'll share, because I know we're almost at time here, where it was New Year's Eve, and back when we could socialize, and way back in the day. And I remember saying to my husband, I really just want to stay home with you. Let's make a nice dinner. We'll curl up on the couch and we'll fall asleep together because, I just want to spend the time with you and not share it with anybody else. Because in the past, we've always gone out and I just kind of felt that I didn't get enough of you. And, and like, that's sweet and loving. Well, let me tell you, he heard something totally different. He had an attitude all day, didn't speak to me the rest of the night, and went to bed by himself.
On New Year's.
I was left thinking, what the hell happened? What the hell happened? Here's what I didn't do.
Yeah.
My responsibility. I didn't check in. Because by the time we got through the next day, and I said, we need to talk about what happened at this point. And he's like, yeah. So when we did, I was like, what did you hear me say? He goes, I heard that for the past 20 years, you had miserable New Year's Eves with me.
Whoa. That's so different.
I would have never thunk that. It was like, who'd have thunk that?
Yeah.
But my passion in expressing my love landed completely on the wrong side of the fence. I mean, we laugh about it now and we laughed about it then and say, okay, let's have a do-over. But that was why he, was pissy. So he had the responsibility to say like, wait, are you saying what I think you're saying? And then I would have had a chance to say no. But I also, this is us both taking responsibility, could have said, does that sound okay to you? Like, what are you hearing me say? And checking in. I never thought I thought I was so articulate. And so this happened. So instead of us, like normally, I would have been so mad that I wouldn't have spoken to him for weeks. And this could have dragged on, but it was having that difficult conversation and going there and risking, the possibility is I could have my feelings hurt, where he could have said, I just don't want to spend any time with you on New Year's. I'd rather be in a crowd of people where I could ignore you. Like, I'm just being, hyperbole at this point.
And even in the moment, and I'm not, I'm thinking of situations for me, not the one you're telling me about, noticing someone's energy shifts or their emotion shifts, or they've distance, or now they're not talking to you, and even, at work, I can think of times where my clients talk about things that are already a month old and they're just letting it slide and they're avoiding it. And one of my favorite phrases is to sort of state a fear out loud up front, like, I need to talk to you. At the risk of blank, whatever it is, I'm afraid, at the risk of you blowing up, or at the risk of you judging me, or at the risk of whatever that thing is we wish we could say, here's what really matters, and I want to clear this up. Or I think something might have gone wrong somewhere, a disconnect, and it's so much better. Sometimes we think about it a day later, an hour later, and we start shortening that, and then we can get to in the moment, say, wait, how did your face is different. What did you just hear?
Especially when you notice that energy shift, I keep thinking about that incident, and like I noticed the energy shift and I kept asking, and it was like, well, my husband's German, so of course it's gonna be nothing. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm like, but clearly you're not fine. But it's just like, then you have that choice point. Well, maybe they just need some space. And you afford them that space, and maybe, but you can't be responsible for other people.
Yeah.
You can only be responsible for yourself, who you're being and how you show up. And, I remember just thinking, what, I did my best to try to find out what was going on, and he just needed space to process it. And we didn't get to clear it to the next day. So there you go.
So did you do a January 1st New Year's Eve do-over?
Yeah, we did do-over.
I love it.
We did a do-over, but it was a collective exhale, like, but not everybody is on the same pace of personal development that you may be on. And so being okay with giving them extra time to process, like I'm super impatient, like, why can't we talk about this now and deal with this now? And then it's all about timing again. He just wasn't in space to be able to.
And you and I are in this. coaching energy all the time.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we're like,
Well, I'm really careful with my family. Like, I ain't coaching you people into anything. Like,
yeah.
because I'll get from my kids, stop coaching me, mom. You're not my coach.
Well, listen,
Nora, are you my ideal client? So bye.
yeah. But we are processors in general.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I could talk to you all day. You've always got these great stories and ways of making it really clear. So I find you very articulate, and it's just great. So I really, for those watching, and we're talking to Facebook people and we're talking to LinkedIn people. Where can people get a hold of you? You mentioned that handout on your website. So let me put that in the chat, or if you don't, you tell it to me and I'll put it in the chat. What is your website? It's your name, right?
Yeah, it's evamedilek.com. And, and anybody who wants to, have a strategy session with me, they can go to talkwitheva.com as well. But yeah, my book, 6 Powerful Ways of Being That Foster Effective Connection and Communication. It's just a free download, probably 8 or 12 pages, not long, but it really gives you actionable things that you can do in situations to have more effective communication, especially during difficult conversations, and bring that connection closer. So it'll pop up on my website as well, or you can go straight to the download. Mm-hmm.
And then you have a Facebook group that I visit fairly often, Intimacy of Race. I want people to know about that. And that they can just look on that.
Yeah, it's the Intimacy of Race Facebook group. This Facebook group was born out of the racial events of this past year. That was my mobilizing moment. And Gail, the Intimacy of Race, the book, is going to be launched on February 1st as well.
Whoa, I saw that. I didn't know it was that soon.
Yeah, and that group is really a safe place to have uncomfortable conversations about race. In a nutshell, there's no judgment, there's no making you wrong. You can put your foot in your mouth, but it was designed for white presenting people of privilege by way of their color to learn how to open up these discussions about race, and people who want to be stronger allies for marginalized communities.
That's great. All right. Well, I've got it in the comments so people can find it. Thank you so much, Eva, for
thank you for having me. This was
with me. Yeah, I've enjoyed it, and it's great because I actually think we met in that group. I think our shared friend Gladys introduced me to your group. So you never know how you're going to meet wonderful people, and they're everywhere. So a lot of love to you. Thank you.
You too, sweetheart. Thank you, and Happy New Year. Bye, everybody.
Okay, bye. Thank you.